Welcome in, everybody. Today, we are so pleased to have Dr. Tushar Bhagat with us, who is a PhD in biological sciences from the Albert Einstein College of Medicine. He has 3 master's degrees in botany, biomedical sciences, biotechnology, and he has committed a really large chunk of his time to teaching and learning and being a student of mindfulness. He has a lot of training in yoga and mindfulness practice. And he has trained to be a mindfulness instructor from the University of Massachusetts Medical Center as well as Brown University. He uses these mindfulness and MBSR and other stress reduction programs at medical school and at the cancer research institutions, where he helps cancer patients and graduate and medical students, medical residents, and fellows. I was very lucky to have been able to take a class directly from Tushar. It was an 8-week course, and it's about last year that we took it, but we've been planning this collaboration for about 3 years at this point, and we feel so lucky to be able to connect, even though it's still virtual and we're all still distanced and it's over Zoom. So thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you, Madhu, for creating this platform and for this opportunity to connect with this community. And I'm so happy we could do this and hopefully serve this community through mindfulness. And thank you for the kind introduction.
Well, we're very happy to have you. So I just wanted to get started because you've been teaching mindfulness and meditation, and they've become a little bit very commonly used these days. What is the difference actually between meditation and mindfulness?
Yeah, so as meditation or mindfulness is getting more and more popular, so many different versions of it are coming up. So many different understandings of it are coming up. And this is due to the fact that there are many different types of meditations. And I will talk about what mindfulness is as well. So many different types of meditations. Broadly, they are in 2 categories. One would be the religious category. Multiple religions have different types of meditations. And then there's a secular meditation that I teach under MBSR. So let me plug in mindfulness in the context of meditation. So mindfulness basically is being aware of whatever is going on, whether you're doing something, whether you're just sitting still and noticing what's going on around you, just knowing what is happening from moment to moment. That is mindfulness. Now, meditation involves mindfulness. For example, if you're doing breath meditation, for example, a secular one, you're being aware of the breath. Yeah, so that is a type of meditation, but being aware itself is mindfulness. Now, you can practice mindfulness outside of the context of meditation, which is, let's say, while you're running or jogging or exercising or swimming. You basically are aware of the water, your arms, your legs moving as you're running, as opposed to having some music in the ear and not really noticing your body. So that is also a way to be mindful. Very common one is when you're eating, just noticing that you're eating. So that's mindfulness in the context of everyday life, and mindfulness as a part of a meditation itself. So that's how we can kind of connect the two. Hopefully that brings some more clarity to it.
I think that was definitely helpful.
Mhm.
I know a lot of people are trying to be mindful, are trying to meditate, especially over the pandemic. We've had so many people, patients, students, fellows alike, trying to practice mindfulness. What do you think makes the practice of mindfulness or meditation hard?
Yeah. So I want to mention this, that the practice of mindfulness can be hard, but at the same time, it could also be very useful and supportive, and everything in between. So I want to like dispel this notion of mindfulness either being very calming and relaxing or very hard or difficult. Yeah. So focusing on what makes it difficult is the mind wandering, which is like the nature of our brain, which is protective of us, like to protect us from when we are running in the wild. Uh, but when we, for example, sit and meditate, what becomes difficult is really focusing on what you are suggested to focus. For example, breath meditation. Uh, because what happens is all these different things that you need to do in life, making breakfast or finishing your assignment, preparing for the next test, picking up your child, all of these things, they come to your mind without you wanting to. Because you certainly could have, let's say, better control over this. And then the mind again goes back and forth between, oh, I cannot focus on my breath. Look at me, I'm so distracted. And then at the same time, the mind is going back to the thoughts, then to the meditation. The process of beating yourself up, scolding yourself, being unkind to yourself, this goes on during this time. And that's what shows up as one of the forms of difficulty on the cognitive level. On the physical level, the difficulty only shows up when a person is sitting for a longer time, which manifests in form of bodily pain, most commonly knee pain, or maybe it's the shoulders aching, or something else that might come up in the body. It varies for people. Bodily difficulty, cognitive difficulty. If I were to summarize them in two categories, that's how the difficulty in meditation shows up.
Thank you. I think that was a little bit of some of the things that you're talking about. I have definitely experienced as I took your class and as I've continued my individual practice, just having that constant task list running through our heads, or all the things that are not quite done in your life, whether that be a task list or whether it just be like, I want COVID to be over and oh my God, I need COVID to be over so badly. So there's always challenges to the practice, I think.
The one thing that I really wanted to ask was, when we're talking about meditation or even real mindfulness as such linked to meditation, we are talking about single-minded focus on something. But in a daily life, when you're talking about meditation, yeah, it does help when you are focusing on an activity far more than what you're normally focusing on, so that you are able to get it done more effectively. But at the same time, I've seen people who are just so single-mindedly focused on something in daily life that it actually cripples them, because they're not aware of anything else. They've forgotten this, they've forgotten that, and they're just doing what they're doing, maybe reading a book or playing a game or whatever it is. And even that level of single-minded focus sometimes becomes not so useful, right? So I just wanted to know, when would it be a good time to distinguish between the two, and if there is a distinction?
Oh, this is a very, very important question. I'm glad you caught that and you asked that. There is a difference between, for example, a person is maybe playing video games to the extent that they don't know what's going on. The house is burnt down. But that is not mindfulness. That is not awareness. It is getting, let's say, sucked into something without wanting to. Yeah. And mindfulness is willfully while being aware. Now, playing video games for 2 days straight is also willfully, someone is willing, but then the part where they get sucked into it and not able to come out of that. So that's where the sense of agency is gone. So that is one major distinction between that. And another, let's say more mundane example I can give is, if someone is reading a book, they're really engrossed in reading and the storyline and the characters and all that, that they can't hear anyone inviting them to dinner. That again is not being aware. It's being sucked into it, as one of the common examples. So there is this basic difference of, like I said earlier, being aware of whatever is going on from moment to moment. So one moment I'm reading the book, and other moment, let's say Madhu is calling me, then I'm still aware of that moment, and then I'm receiving this call. So that ability to be present from moment to moment is the difference between the mindfulness that is involving sense of agency versus getting sucked into and kind of getting tunnel visioned and clueless of everything else. There's a major difference. I hope that helps.
Thank you, Tushar, for clarifying that. Just want to talk about mindfulness and anxiety, especially in the setting of the pandemic. We all are experiencing insane amounts of anxiety. It feels like whether we want it to be over, whether we're working from home, whether we've lost jobs, or whether we've lost loved ones, or whether we're struggling ourselves. Can you talk a little bit about, I mean, as a scientist, what is the science behind anxiety? and then extrapolate on how mindfulness can help, because it feels sometimes that when we're anxious, the last thing we want to do is to sit still and do nothing.
Yes. So this is another very big question, particularly relevant to the pandemic. Like you said, anxiety is all on all-time high. Even people who are not anxious or did not know anxiety on their experiential level, they also were finding them anxious. So I want to briefly, let's say, explain this in like two steps. The first step, the very brief neuroscience of it, and how does that show up on behavioral level. Yeah. So on the neurocognitive level, anxiety is a milder version of fear. Fear, I mean, that's a inherent, let's say, capacity of a person that protects them from any danger. And the part of the brain that actually supports this process of fear and therefore responds to that fear is the amygdala, or what we call as our ancient brain, the reptilian brain. And together with the dorso-anterior post singular cortex, which amplifies the fear signal or anxiety signal, will spring us into action, either run away or fight the imminent danger. Now, what happens, let's say, on a cognitive level, experiential level, when we have fear of the pandemic and then anxiety, the milder version of it, when it constantly stays, uh, because it should be, let's say, an acute event. We are we are anxious, we are fearful, we dealt with that difficulty. Now we are done. Now we are on to our regular life. But what is happening? The anxiety is staying constantly. Now, I want to link that to the logical brain. What does that to the logical brain? There's a connection between our reptilian brain, the anxious brain or the fear brain, and our, let's say, logical brain. So due to the constant activation of the anxious brain, what happens is the conscious brain, let's say the logical brain, gets affected. Affected meaning we're not able to make decisions that are better for us, the decision making, or reasoning to ourselves that is this good for me or is this not? Making a wise decision for ourselves and others, that gets impacted. A very famous example of this that people tell me is when they get frustrated with their near or dear one, spouse, child, or their coworker, their logical brain usually helps them to stop reacting and getting in trouble. But now that wall is gone, now they find themselves like snapping at people. And then it only escalates into more, bringing more trouble. So that's what I can say about how anxiety is connected to the neuroscience and how it shows up on behavioral level on a day-to-day basis and gives us more trouble, more reason to be mindful or to learn mindfulness and practice it every day.
So very interesting, because you brought up the connection between the amygdala, which is what you were mentioning as your more primitive uh, reptilian brain, and your frontotemporal lobes, which we, as advanced species, is the decision center, or what we call our decision center of our brain. Can you talk a little bit more about what happens to the brain when we're anxious and how mindfulness helps that at a neuroscience
Mm.
level?
Hmm. So, okay, so I'll say two things about what actually happens to the brain besides it getting more activated, and how does that look like. So, in all these studies that these cognitive neuroscientists do, for example, what they would do is they will show some very disturbing images to their, let's say, experimental humans, and then they put them in the brain scanner, the fMRI, where what we'll find is we'll find what part of the brain is getting more active, which would mean that type of reaction will come out. So what they see upon seeing fearful images, their amygdala is lighting up. And how it lights up is it shows up like, let's say, a blue or red color, as opposed to they will have control subjects who might look at beautiful images and they don't have that amygdala lighting up. Now on the, let's say, further anatomical level, if a person is subjected to more fear, more anxiety, that particular part of the gray matter, it actually grows. And what that translates into, the tendency or habit pattern of reactivity, it also grows. Now, how mindfulness affects the brain and how that looks like is then the cognitive logical brain, when person meditates on a regular basis, studies have shown that actually grows. And then with the same token, the logical decision-making brain will be more present in your life uh, to stop you from reacting, to stop you from snapping, getting more in trouble. So on anatomical level and behavioral level, both mindfulness seems to affect that. And then other functionalities, because I want to perform well by meditating. I don't want to become this person who has stopped reacting, who has become a vegetable. That's not the idea. Like what Amishi Jha, the neuroscientist from University of Miami mentions, she actually studies how mindfulness, logical brain, and other parts of brain, while getting trained, improves attention of a person, particularly, for example, in context of army, where they have to make life and death decision, whether to shoot or not. It's a very important decision that seems to get enhanced. And in sports, these sports celebrity, when they decide to make a pass or to shoot the ball, it's like winning or losing, millions of dollars at stake, and and careers. So that's what I can say about how it looks like at brain level, and not only on your interactional level, but also active performance level, how that can help.
Thank you. That was enlightening. I think you mentioned a lot of studies, and we're going to put the links in the description of the video for the studies, as well as on our Accomplished Aging page. So if you'd like more information on any of them, do check out our reference links below as well. We have a question from one of our audience members on how long the effect of a meditation session will last. So if I was an elite athlete, would I have to meditate right before the game? Can I meditate in the morning? Can I meditate the week before? Like, how does this work?
Mm. Yeah, so the analogy that I like to give when people ask that, how long, how often, what's the effect, and how long the effect will last. So I like to give the exercise analogy. For example, if an athlete is training for, let's say, a bunch of months to gain endurance and strength and precision for whatever sports they are involved in, they're training for that. But at the day of performance, they might do some sort of warm up or some sort of exercise just to get toned up and such. So in somewhat similar way, long-term mindfulness practice actually develops this ability in this person to make split-second decisions. However, right before the game, like this is from all these studies that I've been quoting, that's where I'm talking from. They do practice, let's say, 15 minutes or half an hour before their actual performance. And that seems to help in whatever game, whatever thing they're engaging in.
I think this study you brought up about Army veterans and people who are actively engaged in war using mindfulness to make those like kind of life and death decisions, and probably doctors as well. I think there were some studies showing that it improves like patient outcomes from procedures, etc. We have this notion that there's a practice, right? You build your practice of mindfulness, and over years, especially when you're talking about brain anatomy changes and plasticity, it's a very long drawn out process. It doesn't happen overnight. And oftentimes when people are reaching for mindfulness, they're already anxious. So what is the key to success at that point of time when you don't have that practice space to go back to build the practice at a time of anxiety?
Okay, so yeah, this is a very crucial question, because one wants to see the effects translate in their day-to-day life, making their life easy, if you will. Yeah. But also to start somewhere and know that I will get the benefits in my lifetime, within my lifetime, not when I'm 90, 95, practicing or meditating for that long. So what I would suggest is a two-step approach. The first step is bringing some regularity. For example, meditating at least 5 minutes every day. Yeah, not like taking on too much. 5 minutes every day. if that becomes a habit pattern, like they say in 21 days, then beginning to add more time. For example, 5 minutes can become 7 minutes or 10 minutes in a week or so, and so on. And what I've seen, at least from the studies and from hearing from long-term meditation practitioners, it sounds like a cumulative effect, meaning it gets, let's say, more and more manageable to meditate uh, as they practice regularly. And in terms of how much they can get to, meaning from 5 minutes to how much, so I would say it has been possible for people. And what I'm saying is even neurosurgeons who have a really busy life schedule, it's possible for them to meditate at least half an hour to an hour each day. And those who have the ability and the time, they can go further. I can talk about that in the question and answers later on if there is any interest.
So when we practice, and even when some of the apps, we talk a lot about acknowledging thoughts in your head. That when you're trying to focus, if you have an intrusive thought, you acknowledge it and let it go and release it again, or it comes back to you, acknowledge it, release it again. And you emphasize a lot being kind to yourself. Can you explain what the emotion behind that is?
Okay, so this is one of the most common thing that comes, like the mind getting distracted, and then often the recommendation is to just objectively watch it, not to react to it, and being kind to yourself. Now, if I refer back to the neuroscience of the negative habit loop or negative thinking that happens, is that's what we are trying to kind of dampen and reduce. This is one of the, let's say, one of the reasons I can say why that is recommended, to be kind to yourself. And in the process, also the habit of non-reacting is developed as a result. Yeah, there are several pronged, let's say there are many different things going on when a person is actually deciding to not react, deciding to be kind to themselves. But these are the two major ones that I can say are definitely experienced by people over the time as they keep practicing.
So, so the one thing I did want to check in on you, because we were going to tape earlier this month, and you were on a silent retreat for 12 days and without a phone, without any email connections. How have those kinds of retreats helped your practice or helped develop your practice?
Hmm. So what I would say is, let's say, again, I like to go back to exercise. Imagine I have like a particular exercise regimen, and I do like 5 reps of this exercise, like say biceps, I do 5 reps of some sort of cardio and 5 reps of, let's say, some leg exercises. Now imagine someone is interrupting me over and over. I'm somehow managing to get through these 3, but somehow it's not, let's say, a complete set of exercises. It doesn't give me what I want as an outcome. So somehow similarly, if this analogy works, going on a longer silent retreat, it takes away these distractions that kind of interfere while going deeper in the practice of meditation. When I say deeper, I'll give a very brief example. Imagine I'm sitting and meditating, and the mode of my meditation there is focusing on, let's say, my feet. And then someone is doing construction work above me. I'm focusing on my feet, and then there they are, creating a sound. My mind goes there, and then back to my feet, and back and forth. So basically, it gives you complete silence, complete, let's say, circumstances that remove additional distractions from life. So one can only focus on, for example, your feet or breath or whatever way of meditation that is recommended during that time. Uh, but this only sounds like, okay, it's helpful to go and meditate in silence without phone and so on. But there's one more layer of this. For example, I'm used to having my phone, I'm used to having my books and whatnot, my headphones for music and so on. Now all that is taken away. Now this also helps me develop my capacity of detachment to things. and also getting back to them. Detachment doesn't mean like going off in the mountains, leaving everything and everybody. It's the ability to modulate between the two uh, seamlessly. Yeah. So again, these are two major approaches. And there are many other things, for example, the meditation practice itself, how it advances. Uh, so what I would say is, imagine if I come back from a 10-day retreat, I would practice, let's say, the ability to not react. And the ability, for example, someone is asking me a question that is intended to kind of tell me how I don't know stuff. Now, the way I would handle that would be different when I come back from this retreat, because my ability to not react is more, and therefore uh, I will be able to access, let's say, some logical reasoning that I can give them. But without that, both of those things would not be possible. And then if I am reacting to someone, what am I teaching people? Walking the talk is what it helps me. To summarize it, that's what helps me, let's say, put my into my practice, do as I say when I come back from these retreats. And then one more major aspect is to continue my daily practice of 1 hour or 2 hours every day. That gets easier after coming back from, let's say, a 10-day of full silence, several hours of practice. Yeah.
No, I think we've had some audience questions. The first one, I read somewhere that a lot of great leaders in many fields have said that intuitive, obvious answers suggest themselves when they meditate. Has that ever happened to you? Have you had personal experience with it?
Okay, so before I answer this question, I want to give a disclaimer and then a very brief prelude. So mindfulness science and research is fairly new. It has only come up since last 40 years. And only now that we are having like exponential rise in research on mindfulness. Why I'm saying that is there's so much more that we don't know yet through a scientific lens. However, it has been known through an experiential lens for thousands of years. I think this question falls into that. Um, so from the, let's say, quote unquote, spiritual teachers of mindfulness or the mindfulness scientists, when they talk about spirituality, they do mention this. And if I talk about my experience, the intuitive, let's say, responding, that has happened. And I can attribute that to, let's say, the subconscious being trained during mindfulness, because it all seems like a conscious activity, but the subconscious gets trained. Let's say the negative, let's say, perspective the subconscious might have, that seems to shift over the time. And a very good example I can give you is, let's say, family and people who are really close to me are the ones who can easily push my buttons. I don't know if it sounds familiar to people. So that's when, for example, if my let's say if my brother does something and my usual habit pattern is to, this is what I tell mom all the time, and she never listens to me. But then intuitively, without me deciding that, okay, I need to be logical, I need to not snap, I find that if I think back, I find that, my usual dialogue is such and such, but I didn't seem to use that. Usual dialogue being like snapping back or making a smart comment to my brother or to my mom. So when I think back, I said, oh, wow, that comment is missing here. So I can say that happened without me actually making an effort to do so. That might be the closest example or the direct example in my experience I can give. Yeah. And there are
I think
several
you
others.
alluded, I'm sorry, you alluded to something that actually leads us right into our next question from the audience, because you're talking a little bit about negative perspectives that show up in mindfulness. Our next question was, do bad thoughts or negative thoughts or thoughts we may not want to have or to deal with come up more when you meditate? Like, is this the wild, wild west of your mind? And how do I accept that?
So I'll begin with like a small example. Like, let's say if I had a conflict with someone in my life, who's very important to me, but the conflict averse in me is like avoiding even talking to them, because I know if I bring that up, the whole can of worms will be opened, and then that will be very unpleasant, very difficult for me. So I better keep that away. So taking that example, difficulties within us, difficult thoughts, interactions. And what I will say, it only is in two major domains. It's either something of the past or it's some worry about the future. Yeah. And then the two reactions I found people have is a strong attachment to something or the strong aversion, or let's say pushing away that happens. Yeah. So those type of things come up. So people are never on play. They're either on rewind or fast forward, like Amishi says. So what I would say is it's important for those things to come up so that we are able to address them. Not only those past things get addressed, at the same time, our ability to deal with the unpleasant, the uncomfortable, the difficult, it becomes stronger and stronger as a result. So it is a good thing, however difficult it might be, but it's a good thing that these things come up. And that's one of the ideas of mindfulness, to allow these things that are suppressed for a long time and might have, let's say, negative impact uh, intuitively, like we talked about earlier, on our actions without us knowing, without us being aware. So that's how they are connected. So it's a good thing. But what I would say is a very important part of this. If something like that comes up, people need proper guidance, proper support and help to know what to do exactly in those moments. Do I stay with it? Do I let it go? That's a very important part. So that's where the group and a experienced facilitator or teacher is very important. Speaking of trauma sensitive mindfulness, which is an upcoming and really important field lately.
Thank you for bringing that up, Tushar, because I know you have mindfulness sessions that deal specifically with, well, a lot with pain, because you have a lot of research with cancer patients and you're helping them, because Tushar lives another life as a research scientist working in the hematology oncology division and at Albert Einstein College of Medicine in New York. And he does work with a lot of cancer patients who do experience quite a lot of pain, either due to the cancer itself or due to the treatments. Tushar, are there any classes that our viewers can tap into, or that our audience can tap into with you or with other people that are coming up?
Yeah, I mean, there are plethoras of classes and courses. It's just how you access and use them. And there's several free ones and there are several paid ones, but I will talk about the ones I know of that I personally teach and my colleagues do that I can recommend people to. So I have, let's say, I have 4 classes that I teach on a weekly basis and they're all free. And my intention to offer them is to have something to go to for people on a weekly basis to continue their practice. This also forms a sense of community. And I've seen that helps people look forward to seeing the people that they are practicing with on a weekly basis. So it's Monday, noontime, Eastern Standard Time, Thursday morning, 6 a.m., same New York time. The other 2 free sessions that I teach are on something called as, speaking of mindfulness apps, it's called the Insight Timer. So I teach 2 classes there, 6:30 a.m. on Thursdays and 6:30 a.m. on Thursdays and 6:30 a.m. on Fridays as well. One day I talk about mindfulness practice focused on a particular theme, like we said, grief or pain, or loving friendliness, loving kindness. And on Fridays, I particularly specifically talk about any new or previous seminal research on mindfulness, some science of mindfulness, if you will. Yeah.
If you want to tap into any of these sessions, we're going to leave links to the Insight Timer, at least in the description, as well as in our blog post.
There's another platform that I teach at called Studio B. So I have made some recorded guided meditations available there, and also on Insight Timer.
What I think would be very useful, at least from a personal point of view, when I have gone through these guided meditations by other people, is that when you're doing it remotely, there is no feedback. Like there's nothing to tell us whether we are on track, especially if you're just starting, and your mind has wandered off through 75% of the meditation time, and you're back at some point when the guide just finishes winding up or something. and then it just demotivates you from tuning into the next to the next. That's one. And second, sometimes a topic is just so not yours, like you don't zone into to that particular topic, like somebody will talk about loving meditation or some other meditation. It just doesn't strike a chord with you at that point.
This really focuses on whether a person will meditate after doing the recorded meditation, because they don't know what's happening. They don't know what to do. There's no one else to answer their questions. So this is one of the reasons why I have kept live guided meditations. And at the end, I leave a few minutes for question and answers in all my sessions. And particularly, I use these time zones. I know that early mornings, Eastern Standard Time, it matches every time zone in the world except Australia, where it is 10 p.m. or so. If people are awake later, even the Australians can join in. So I know the morning time works for the whole world. And then there's noon time for the West Coast America, because that's the one that works for them the best. So there's this thing, the live one, that I think might work for most people. But what I do is on Insight Timer, I also formed a group there. So people can leave messages. Like, for example, someone said, oh, my husband is suffering from so-and-so. Do you know what we can look into? What type of meditation could help? Then they send this message at their convenience, and I respond to them at my convenience too. So there are these two methods to really connect, to get questions answered, so people can stay with it, stay with their practice. So I hope that helps.
That's excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us, Tushar. This was a great session.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's a great pleasure to connect with this community, and I look forward to seeing people again, and look forward to questions if people may have after listening to this session and others.
And as a reminder, if you have any questions for Dr. Bhagat, please leave them in the comments and we will pass them on. Thank you for joining, everyone.